Hello everybody, Ben Woodruff here with another Falconry video. Today's video is going to be my first video review, and this is a video review of an amazing production called Falcons of Arabia. But this is not so much of a review as much as a promotion of this particular piece of media. It's amazing, it's wonderful, and I'm frankly upset that people haven't seen it. They don't know about it. It's important for many different reasons, and I'll get into that. But I kind of want to give you a taste of what's in it, explain what it is, why it's important compared to other current productions, and give you the links in the description so that you can go see it yourself. And please, not only watch it, but please share it with other people. I would love for as many people to watch Falcons of Arabia as possible. Before I jump into this description, if you haven't already, if you could please hit subscribe. Really does help me keep this channel up and going. And again, I would love to hear all your comments and ideas for future videos as well, and things you would like me to review and topics you would like me to cover. So, Falcons of Arabia. I've been a falconer since the 1900s, I always like to joke around about. And Falcons of Arabia was filmed in 1990. I think it came out in 1992. It came out on VHS. Now, it was basically made by Andy Edwards. Wesley Edwards was the executive producer, Andy Edwards producer, and the cinematographer who filmed it all. It was Joseph Bauer was the narrator, and I'll get into his voice in a minute because it was awesome and have some fun comments about that. And Francine Harker and Vel Heeb were the editors. They did a wonderful job. In the description of this video, Andy kind of bemoans the fact that he wishes that back then there had have been HD available. I don't know all the story of how this was filmed, but it took tremendous work and effort, and it shows. We live in a very different time. We live in a time where we're used to our smartphones, and we're used to access to dopamine-inducing media constantly, to the point that what we love and what we enjoy is gotten shorter and shorter and shorter, briefer, less depth. It's just a little bloop. Here's a cat sneezing. Okay, that's what we want to watch. And this was made in a very different time. So first of all, just from a production perspective, Falcons of Arabia is amazing because it's in a time where effort was made to have care, to craft something of beauty or of interest or of worth instead of just bloop, bloop, bloop. And that's kind of funny because a lot of people say that that's how I personally am. It's like, no, I have ADHD. I appreciate beauty and depth. So this was made again in a time, and the beginning shows it all. It starts, and the music. First of all, I have to say, I have never been to the Middle East. I hope I will someday. I love the clothing. I love the food. I love so many of the traditions, and I mean, the music. In fact, I collect darbuka and doumbek drums. I collect them, play them. I usually get at least a new one every year. I love Middle Eastern falconry, though. And even though falconry covers just about everywhere in the world, to me, Middle Eastern falconry is just living poetry. The living poetry version of falconry. This video, though, it's why you need to watch this, is this was made at a time of transition. And the video explains this, but it didn't realize just how right it was. It thought, oh, this is modern Arabian falconry. And since this was made in the beginning of the 1990s, so much has changed and modernized about many Middle Eastern falconry in many Arabian countries. And that being said, this is a time capsule. It is right at that threshold. It's got all these old traditions and old ways, and the beginning of the new, and now you can see new Arabian falconry all over the place online. So watch it so you understand that transition and you understand those older traditions, okay? Now, it starts off with, like I said, the beauty. It doesn't have a Ben Woodruff get on and be like, hello, we're going to be talking about blah, blah, blah. There's none of that. There's not even a narrator for quite a chunk. There's beautiful scenery. You see some of the wildlife of the Arabian Peninsula. You see falconers in the field and wild falcons, eagles, all these things with wonderful Arabian music. And then you have the narrator start. Now, Joseph Bauer, the narrator, I love his voice, and his voice is a little bit over the top in a way that was very indicative of the 1990s, especially news anchors. If you were a very good voice performer, then this was kind of a tone and a linguistic way of expressing. He demonstrates it. So if you are from a much younger generation, you might find it kind of different sounding. But for me, it's like, oh yeah, I remember this time, and just it takes me back. He does a good job. The terms being used are again, even though this video teaches, it does so with a poetic love for the sport of falconry and for Arabian cultures. There's one line where it begins talking about the migration, where hey, you have these Arabian summers, but then once it turns cool in the fall, it talks about how all the birds start to migrate. And you see images of songbirds and bustards, which we'll get into in a second, and birds of prey. And it says, it's talking about migrations. It says, this timeless cycle takes no notice of borders, political boundaries, or the politics of men. Instead, it moves according to the system of nature. And I'm like, I love that. Now, maybe if I was making that today, I'd say, all right, in the fall, all the birds, they feel the cold. Their food source is dying or moving, and so they all have to move. I love the poetry that takes the time to paint a picture that's enjoyable. It's not just educational, it's entertaining. So it starts introducing falconry, and it briefly mentions that, okay, here's how falconry probably started, and it was practiced in many different countries. But then it talks about how in the Arabian Peninsula, the tradition of falconry has not only been sustained, but it's been modernized and it's expanded. And again, I don't know if Andy could have known when he made this just how much further it would expand and just how much further it would modernize, from drones to GPS transmitters to artificial remote control birds that are chased. All kinds of things have happened all over the world, but especially in the Middle East. And again, it is expanded and is a thriving practice there. It goes into talking about how Saker falcons, second largest falcon in the world, and peregrine falcons are the two falcons that were most utilized in Middle Eastern falconry, and why that was. Now again, today Sakers are still a staple, but we also see a whole lot of gyr falcons and gyr peregrine hybrids. We see much more in captive breeding. So it's a bit different, and it's interesting to see how it was then and why they used those birds for thousands of years up until the 90s, and why it started to change now. Then it goes into, and it says there are kind of two stages. Remember, you have, in the Arabian Peninsula, you have all these songbirds and game birds and wild falcons migrating. And you have these falconer camps migrating along with them. And as they are migrating over these months, then he says there are two stages. There's first the trapping stage, and then there is the training and hunting stage. So in this early season, as they are going through camp, it goes into trapping. Now, it explains several different kinds. Some traps it shows, some trapping techniques it just references. So it talks about trapping with an Arabian pigeon harness, which is a bit different than a lot of the pigeon harnesses we use in my area in the United States, but it's the same principle. And some of what it shows it in use, there's some comedic moments that I could relate to, and I really appreciate that it's, you can see falconry's falconry, and some of the mishaps and comical and frustrating moments we have here in America are no different than in the Sinai Peninsula. And falconry's falconry. It transcends culture. It transcends so many different things, and I love that part. But it shows pigeon harnesses, ball chattery traps. It shows decoy lines. It shows, my favorite, is very strange, is it shows using shade as bait. Because some of these areas are so flat, there's no changing topography, there's not even a boulder to sit on, and so at night, these migrating falcons just sit, and even in the daytime, sometimes they'll rest. Well, that being the case, if you see a falcon off, then you can put a grate down and bury it with nooses sticking up if there's just one lone sagebrush, and that falcon may come and just land and get caught in those nooses. I thought this is interesting. It references other things, mesh nets, going out at night with just your car lights shining on falcons sleeping on the flat ground and casting nets over them. And it shows the traditional restraint to get it back to camp, which is called an aba. It's just a cloth that goes around the wings and the legs, but keeps the chest open so they don't overheat. This is a kind of a fun part. I didn't want to show too much of that part, but if you want to learn more about how to actually build traps and use them, I do in my book, Trapping Essentials, that I wrote. This is a how-to book I wrote. So if you want to actually see how to make these traps, go to Western Sporting Publications and you can buy this book, and I show how to do it. And I even reference specifically some of the Arabian traps that we don't use in America, but still show how they work and why. After that, it shows back at camp how falconers acclimate their bird hooded in the tent with everybody who's there, and how falconers discuss the bird. They discuss its merits, its color. Is it very light? Is it very dark? What are the size of its feet? The breadth of its chest? Does it have strong flight muscles? And how that's what falconers do anyways. But how neat would it be to be part of a group of falconers that for months are just migrating along the Arabian Peninsula, and to then get all that wisdom and experience discussing what you think about this bird. It then outlines the stages of hunting, which are pretty standard in most countries, which is manning a bird and get him to sit on your fist, get him to eat off your fist, to fly to your fist, fly to the lure, and then entering them in on hunting. It does give a lot of demonstrations of the socializing process, both unhooded and hooded, just getting the birds used to being around people and the sounds of camp. Then it goes into the next stage, which is hunting. So this camp is still migrating along, and it shows, okay, now, and it mentions how Arabian falconry is modernizing. And, of course, you see instead of, riding with camels and with horses, there, of course, are, modern trucks that have been outfitted, with multiple seat benches in back and perches for the falcons. And also the use of telemetry. And now, in my opinion, falconry telemetry has been mastered, and we have GPS telemetry. Like, I love using Marshall Radio's GPS telemetry. It works wonders. And now I know Mercedes and several other car companies manufacture for the Middle Eastern market falconry-specific vehicles that have built-in telemetry mounts, built-in perches, built-in firewood racks on the sides for hauling wood, on the trip. So it has changed quite a bit from this time. You've gone from, camel caravans to what you see in this video, which is kind of that transition, and then eventually what we have today in 2022. So, but still you see a lot of the traditions, even though they are out on with these trucks in this production. You see the traditional bustard trackers. Now, the bustard is the primary quarry of traditional Middle Eastern falconers in most countries. It is a very large bird, and it is a bird that once it is attacked, it will either try to fly away and outpace the falcon, or it will stand its ground on the ground and poof up all its feathers and try to look menacing, in which case the saker falcon and it will do a battle on the ground. But the trackers of these birds, these bustard trackers, are masters, and it shows them in action instead of walking out in front of, falconers on horse or on camel. It shows them out in front of trucks, and they're tracking these individual bustards and following their tracks and seeing where they are. It's really neat to see. It's really neat to see that mix of tradition and innovation in the more modern age. Then it goes in and shows saker falcons and bustards fighting in the traditional ground fight, which this is something that a lot of American falconers, it's a hunting style that we don't normally engage in. And most American falconry comes from European falconry, and most northern western European falconry with falcons consists of training a falcon, usually a peregrine, to circle up above, to wait on above you, and you or a dog flushes up a duck, something like that, and your falcon dives down, knocks it out of the sky. Now, Arabian falconry does utilize that. However, there's no discouragement from a bird diving from a low pitch. It's like, if it gets it, it gets it. And fighting on the ground, fighting a bustard on the ground is fine and even encouraged. And that is shown in this. They show how that actually works and how it's applauded and how that's part of part of this. These amazing, the two titans of the wild being able to fight and wrestle, and one will survive or the other one will survive. One will get away or one gets dinner. It shows tail chases, how sometimes the bustard will be like, nope, forget this, and will take off. And they explain how a lot of times if that tail chase is going too long, of course they're bringing out the telemetry, but they will sometimes release a faster peregrine falcon and let it go up and get and catch up, because it's faster in level flight than the Saker, is what they say on this program. Now, then it shows once you're back at camp that this is a time that once they are in the hunting season, that they have a tent specifically dedicated to the birds. So you bring your Arabic block perch, put it in the ground, put your bird there, and let them rest for the evening. Now, this is also a time where if there's anything that needs to be addressed, like imping, that can be done. Imping is if a bird breaks a feather. There is a technique called imping where we can take previously molted feathers and repair and replace the damaged section of feather. It's a very good technique, and it is shown in this. They give a demonstration of this on a bird that needed that help, which is kind of cool to see Middle Eastern imping. And again, falconry is falconry. Some of our techniques and our traditions are different, but we run into the same problems, and what solutions do we use? Often they're very similar. After that section, this video shows where all the falconers are outside telling stories by the fire, and they're talking about the day's hunts and old stories from the past of previous years and previous decades hunts. And every time I see this, I feel like I'm there, and I wish it'll probably never happen. I hope that someday I will get to go to the Middle East and be able to go out and practice falconry and just enjoy those traditions with the people who still fly today in the Middle East, because again, it's such a rich heritage, and I would just love to be in the evening sitting by the campfire, hearing their stories, sharing a couple of mine, and just having that experience. It's beautiful. After that, it takes an interesting turn. And again, you wouldn't see this in a modern production, which I appreciate. Is the rest, the almost 10 minutes of this production are almost until the end. Basically, there's no narration. There's just beautiful, sweeping music and just footage edited together, stitched together in a fabulous way, just showing falconry, just showing the birds hunting, and showing the rest of that hunting season, showing bustards escaping, bustards being caught, falconers coming in, tail chases, everything. Just about everything you can have happen, you see in that, which I really enjoy, and I think that's something that we don't see these days. So the whole production overall is beautiful. There's all kinds of little things in there, the tradition of Arabian coffee. It talks about that, and there's a section where it's just right in the middle shows, hey, some rabbits were spotted by the trackers, and so they released the Saluki hounds, which are one of the most ancient breeds of dog on the planet. It's a sight hound, and they're almost as fast as a cheetah, and it shows the Saluki is chasing down a rabbit for dinner, and so you have all these bits and pieces of culture and tradition and traditional camp life. And those are all interspersed throughout the whole thing. But basically, other than that, you have poetic introduction, trapping, training, hunting, and then a poetic end of the hunting season. I love this show. And again, my main reason for doing this quick little review is to encourage people to go see it. So please follow the link in my description and watch this production and share it. And yes, of course, it's in the era before high definition. And to me, it doesn't detract. It's so well shot, and the music is so indicative of what it's trying to convey that I'm not distracted in the least bit by the fact that we're spoiled today with our HD. So please watch this. And if you haven't already, please hit subscribe to my channel and let me know some of the things you love about Middle Eastern falconry and what you notice that you appreciate on this video. And as always, happy hawking.